Okay, we're live. Hello, everybody. How you doing? Chuck Holton here, and I'm standing out in my yard in Panama. Such a beautiful day out here. I didn't want to waste it just being indoors, so I decided to bring it outside. And besides, I've got to do a live hit for Newsmax here coming up shortly. So I don't have a ton of time today, but I did a live hit on Newsmax earlier, about an hour ago, and right before I went on, they had two people on to comment on the conflict in Gaza, and I was just pretty appalled by some of the comments that were made by one of the guests, and so I wanted to. I was like, you know how when you hear somebody and they're saying something and you can totally crush that argument and you're just like over there going like, "Ah!" Well, that was me because I wasn't live, so I couldn't talk about what that guy was saying, but I got them to send me the clip, and I'm going to play part of it for you, and then I'm going to break down his arguments and sort of show you why they are deluded, disingenuous. They're just plain wrong. And trying to decide if people like that who attack Israel and come at this argument from a completely anti-Israel standpoint. I mean, forget about the facts, forget about what is happening on the ground, forget about logic and reason. They they are going to make an argument specifically because it's very obvious that they're making their argument specifically because they are anti-Semitic. They're anti-Israel. And look, you can have differences of opinion about whether or not Israel should use a certain strategy or tactic or something like that, but you I mean, you don't get to define your own facts here. And so it's willfully ignorant at best to try to come up with these kind of off the wall reasons that Israel is the bad guy here. I mean, tomorrow is the 6 month anniversary of the attacks on October 7th. And I think uh, we need to continue to remind ourselves and others of the horrors that happened on that day, because none of this would have happened. We would not be where we are. Gaza would still be rocking along just fine if it wasn't for what happened on October 7th. And it's almost like many people have chosen to forget already what happened on October 7th and to try to judge Israel in this vacuum, a vacuum that leaves out, that forgets October 7th. October 7th just like fell into a black hole. So they're trying to judge Israel on what it's doing without the context of October 7th. And I think that's what you're going to see in this clip. So can you guys hear those birds? Man, there's some loud birds here. Where are you all coming in from? I see a few people uh, from England, Ozark Plateau, uh, Shabbat Shalom. Yeah, that's right. It is Shabbat today, isn't it? So I'm not going to have any viewers from Israel, most likely, but they can watch it later. That's all right. Hi from Leicester and Lancaster, one above the other. That's interesting. Kentucky, all over the place. Okay, awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here. Please hit that like button. Oklahoma, Colorado, Texas, Michigan, Germany, North Carolina. That's great. Please hit the like button and check if you've subscribed before and you haven't looked in a while. Go look and see if you're still subscribed to the channel, because I mentioned that yesterday or day before yesterday on the live, and literally had like 600 people subscribed that had already been subscribed before, and YouTube had unsubscribed them. I don't know why they do that. What's the point of having subscriptions if they're just going to randomly unsubscribe people? I really don't think it's a gremlin in their system. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. It's hard to say. Topanga, California, Arizona, Williamsburg, Virginia, Australia, France, Arkansas. I love it that we got people, South Africa, from all over the world that watch. I literally have fans come up and introduce themselves all the time now. Wherever I'm going, I'm walking through an airport, I'll get recognized once or twice. When I'm even here in Panama, I'll have people that watch. It's really cool. Uh, and so thank you for that. Now I want to show you this clip that just aired on Newsmax on Rita Cosby's show just a little while ago, and I want you to listen to this guy and the arguments that he makes about uh, what did Joe Biden just throw Israel under the bus? And I guess I should explain what they're talking about there. There are some negotiations that are starting up this weekend in Egypt, and they're negotiations for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and they're being overseen by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States. Now, what Qatar, Egypt, and the United States have to do or say about this, I'm not sure. It's just that they're trying to push these two warring parties together at the negotiating table and get them to come to an agreement that will result in a cessation of the hostilities. And that's obviously a good thing. You know, nobody wants this war to continue forever. They need to, Israel needs to accomplish their objectives or else they lose the war. And that's really what these negotiations are over. So we're not negotiating for a ceasefire per se. What we're negotiating for is whether or not Israel wins or loses. And unfortunately, of all the parties involved, again, we've got Israel, we've got Hamas, we've got the United States, Qatar, and Egypt. There's only one of those parties who really wants Israel to win. Only one. The United States is making it clear under the Biden administration they don't want the United States to win. I'm sorry, they don't want Israel to win this conflict. They just want the fighting to end by whatever means necessary because we're in an election cycle and this conflict is desperately hurting the Biden administration because if you think about it, it's hurting them from two directions. First of all, they have their base who is very pro-Hamas, very pro-Palestinian, does not believe Israel has the right to exist. They're very left-wing, hard left base. Then they have the donors, the people who are donating to the, because the people that are their very left-wing base are not by and large their largest donors. Their largest donors are people who just sort of default to donating politically to the Democrats. And if you didn't know this, one of the most politically active people groups on planet Earth, specifically in the United States, are Jews. The Jewish people are incredibly politically active, and especially so when it comes to donating to their candidate of choice. And so many people don't know this, but at least half, maybe a little more than half, of all of the political donations that are given to the Democratic Party in the United States come from Jews. Now, they also give about a quarter of all the donations to Republicans as well, and those numbers are going like this. So the amount of donations coming from Jews to the Democratic Party is declining for obvious reasons, and that money is going over to support Republicans in this election cycle. And so that is a huge problem for Joe Biden because it's a lot of money that he's going to lose for his reelection campaign. And he's not necessarily making that up from people who are on the hard left that want Hamas to win this war. And so he has to try to, like I've said over and over again, he's trying to straddle the fence, so to speak. And that's a very sharp and painful fence to straddle. The way he's doing it is he's calling Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone and he's telling him, you have to come to a ceasefire. You have to stop this war. And then he's writing a letter to Egypt and Qatar before these negotiations that are taking place this weekend and saying, please, pretty please, push Hamas to release some of their hostages this time. Because this is where they've been on their negotiations for months. I mean, they've really only had one successful negotiation since the beginning of the war on October 7th. And that ended up with a 1 week ceasefire and the release of like 140 hostages. Okay, that's the only successful negotiation they've had yet. And the reason they haven't been successful since then is because the two parties are so far apart. The Israelis are saying, we will not accept any negotiation, any ceasefire that does not include the return of our hostages. Hamas is saying, we will not accept any ceasefire that doesn't result in us surviving. Well, Hamas surviving is the stated the counter objective. It's 180-degree opposite of the stated objective of the Israelis in this conflict. So Israelis, they want to get their hostages back, but that's not the number one priority. It's right there, okay? But their number one priority has to be ensuring this doesn't happen again, that Hamas does not have the ability to do this ever again. That's their number one priority. Number two priority, which is right there, it's just a hair's off, is getting the hostages back. But they cannot afford to make getting the hostages back the number one goal of this campaign. They really can't, because about the only way, I've talked about this before, about the only way that they would be, that they have a very good chance of getting their hostages back alive, is to allow Hamas to survive, which means they're going to have to go through this again in a year, 5 years, 10 years, whenever. And that's the non-negotiable for Israel, that Hamas has to die. And Hamas is saying, our only non-negotiable is that we don't die. Well, these are pretty far apart. But the United States is putting tremendous, I mean, unbelievable. They've been saying this privately for some time to Israel, that our policy toward Israel is going to change significantly if you don't come up with a ceasefire. But now they're saying it publicly. They're coming out and broadcasting it to the world, which is, not good for Israeli relations. And this is what I've been saying, is that if the United States says this, they are throwing Israel under the bus, because they are putting Israel in a weaker position as they go into these negotiations. They are giving Hamas ammunition for these negotiations that are coming up. And that obviously is throwing Israel under the bus. So let's listen to what this guy had to say, and then we will talk about it.
Grant, why is President Biden throwing Israel under the bus at this time?
President Biden isn't throwing Israel under the bus. He's just asking them to hold up their end of international treaties that Israel is a party to make sure that civilians are treated as civilians and that Israel does not cause a mass famine.
Okay, so he's saying that the only thing the Biden administration wants is for Israel to treat civilians like they're civilians in this conflict. But this shows a just fabulously bad understanding of what war is like. Now, it's pretty obvious to me that Grant Stern has never been in the military. I mean, you could, I'm not saying that by looking at him, I'm saying that by listening to him, okay? So by listening to him, he doesn't understand the nature of war, because Israel has done far more than the United States has ever done in protecting civilians on the battlefield. We've gone, I mean, the United States did not go 50% as far as Israel has gone in this conflict to try to avoid civilian casualties. The reason that we've had civilian casualties, and had plenty of them, is simply because Hamas is doing exactly what Grant Stern is now saying that the Israelis are not doing. Listen to that.
Risk of a terrible, terrible humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza right now because of the effect that Martin Luther King Jr. once described as in the land of an eye for an eye, everyone becomes blind.
Okay, so he's ascribing to Israel. He's saying Israel's actions in this war have led to all of these civilian casualties, but that is uh, that's a straw man because Israel did not start this war. If October 7th had not happened, nothing that followed would have happened in Gaza, and Gaza would be just fine right now. It follows then logically that every death in Gaza is at least in part the fault of Hamas and the people who supported Hamas and the people who voted for Hamas, which is the people in Gaza. Now, he's going to go on and talk about the Geneva Conventions here. Listen to this.
We're in a terrible situation, and Israel simply needs to uphold the Geneva Convention.
Okay, so Israel needs to uphold the Geneva Convention. What does he mean by that? Well, Israel. Okay, the Geneva Convention lays out the ground rules for a noble war, for a just war. Now, we haven't. It bears noting, we have not seen a war like that in since maybe Korea. We certainly that the Vietnam War certainly was not a war that would have uh, that where both parties ascribed to the Geneva Convention. In World War II, of course, the Geneva Convention happened after World War II, but in World War II, they certainly all of the warring parties, including the United States, did not adhere to what is now the Geneva Convention. That's why they came up with the Geneva Conventions. And the Geneva Conventions just basically, let's boil it down to its most simple form. The Geneva Conventions say that civilians and non-combatants should not be targeted by military forces, that military forces should focus their efforts militarily on the opposing military force, that prisoners of war need to be treated humanely on both sides. Okay, that they should not intentionally target civilians. They should not engage in sexual violence. They should not engage in torture or anything like that. Now, go back and ask yourself. This guy is right now excoriating Israel for not following the Geneva Conventions. Okay, I would like you to show me where Israel was torturing people, where they committed sexual violence. They did not. Where they have intentionally targeted civilians on purpose. Uh, they haven't done that yet. This, big brouhaha over the strike on this convoy of World Kitchen people that was delivering aid at 11 o'clock at night. Even though that is a huge mistake on Israel's part. That was a flagrant example of incompetence on some people's part in the IDF, irresponsibility in some people's part in the IDF. That is not a, a transgression of the Geneva Convention. That is called collateral damage, and it happens. It's a mistake. And Israel is taking exactly the steps that a civilized nation would take when a mistake is made. Now, in the fog of war, mistakes happen. And it doesn't make it any less tragic. But again, you have to go back and put the context on this that none of this would have even had to happen if October 7th would not have happened. Now let's ask, did Hamas follow the Geneva Conventions on October 7th? Strangely enough, many people don't know this, but Hamas, or the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian nation, so to speak, agreed to all four tenets of the Geneva Conventions. The United States and Israel only agreed to two of them. So there are these Rome Accords and stuff that specifically lay out or strengthen the argument from the International Criminal Court about targeting civilians, torture, rape, things like that. The Palestinians actually signed, they are a signatory to those things. The United States and Israel are not. So when it comes to following those things, the United States and Israel are actually going above and beyond what they've agreed to do in the past when they go to war. Israel is definitely going above and beyond what it has agreed to in writing based on the Geneva Conventions. It's going above and beyond that. Whereas Hamas is a signatory to the Geneva Conventions and the Rome Accords, and they have tortured, they've raped, they like virtually everything they did on October 7th was in contravention of the Geneva Conventions. And so this guy is specifically excoriating Israel for breaking certain tenets of the Geneva Conventions, which they have not. They have not done. They have gone over and above the Geneva Conventions in their prosecution of this war, and the fact that there are the fact that there are collateral damage, that there are civilians that have died, is not by the Geneva Convention definition a war crime. Uh, Specifically because they have taken so many steps to avoid killing civilians, and they've made it very clear that the civilians who have died, this was not intentional. Okay. All right. So if you see a troll, I'm not watching the comments a lot because I'm trying to keep my train of thought here. I want to get through this. I'm going to back this up a little bit so you can hear what this guy Grant Stern is saying here.
And that Israel does not cause a mass famine. We're at risk of a terrible, terrible humanitarian catastrophe.
Okay, so he's saying now Israel is causing a mass famine. Israel has opened up multiple. Now, no country is under any obligation to feed the enemy that they're trying to destroy. But that's exactly what they're being asked to do in Gaza because the enemy is melting into the civilian population, which is in and of itself a contravention of the Geneva Conventions. Okay? So the fact that there are people going hungry in Gaza is a war crime or a crime against humanity on the part of Hamas because they are melting into the civilian population and hiding among civilians. Okay? So it's pretty crazy. Everything that he's accusing Israel of doing is actually what Hamas is doing
in Gaza right now because of the effect that Martin Luther King Jr. once described as in the land of an eye for an eye, everyone becomes blind.
Okay, so this is an appeal to proportionality. The proportionality argument is that if they strike at you, on a level 3, that you should only strike back on a level 3. Well, that is a recipe for this is crazy, and that is part of the Geneva Conventions, by the way, is proportionality. But that's always been a really stupid argument to make because proportionality means you have essentially limitless, endless war. They hit you, you hit them. They hit you, you hit them. It's like just a ping pong game. Okay? That is not the goal of the Israelis in this conflict. The goal of the Israelis in this conflict is to finish this once and for all. And to do that, proportionality would say, the eye for an eye would say, that they poked out our eye, we're going to poke out their eye. But in order to finish this so that there never can be any more eye poking, Israel has said, we're not going to poke out your eye, we're going to chop off your head. And the world is acting like that's a bad thing, like Israel should not be fighting so hard. They should just, maybe just go after, let's see, they killed 1,134 Jews or Israelis in the October 7th attack. So Israel should make a list of 1,134 Hamas commanders, and they should just go after those guys. Really? I mean, are you stupid enough to think that that's even possible? That they could just go in and surgically remove And if they did that, would that stop this conflict? No, it would probably just reinvigorate it because you'd have a bunch of sub lieutenants who just got promoted, and now they've got to make their bones. They've got to prove that they hate Israel more than the guys that they just replaced. So the appeal to proportionality in a total war is ridiculous.
We're in a terrible situation, and Israel simply needs to uphold the Geneva Convention, and they need to rein in their military better. The IDF admitted tremendous fault in killing 7 World Kitchen volunteers.
Okay, so he said they need to rein in their military better, and then goes on to explain how they are reining in their military after this mistake that was made last week. So he's literally contradicting himself right there
recently. And that's just a sign of the problems that Israel's having navigating this war.
All right, let me bring in Deneen.
Okay, so look, we could go on and on about this. I think that I've stated it pretty clearly, though. What we need to do when we're confronting people like this is, rather than try to argue with them, rather than try to make point for point with them, just simply ask them questions. Ask them questions, and I think by doing so, you can show them the ridiculousness of their arguments. And I've actually been doing this in Israel with Palestinian shopkeepers and other people that I meet who are very pro-Palestine or pro-Hamas. And that is just asking them the question, well, what should Israel have done after the attack on October 7th? And their answer to that question, if they will answer it, many times they won't. They just sputter and just, but Israel is doing this. There's blah, blah, blah. So, whoa. I just asked a question. Can you answer that question or not? What should Israel have done on October 8th? That's all you have to ask. And if they say they should have done nothing because they deserved it, you're not going to get anywhere with that person. If they say, well, they should have only, just killed people a little bit in Gaza, you say, how would you suggest that they do that when the people that need killing are hiding among the civilian populace? The other thing that I've had them do is just literally deny that October 7th happened, that it happened the way that it did. I mean, they'll say, look, Hamas did not kill any civilians on October 7th. And I'm not sure really what to do with that. There's enough video evidence out there filmed by Hamas of them killing civilians. And maybe we should download some of that video onto our phones so we can say, okay, then I'm a little confused. Can you explain to me what's happening right here? What is going on right here? This guy's killing a teenage girl who's on her knees begging for mercy, and this Hamas fighter is shooting her in the head. And there's video of it right there. I mean, what is that? What is that? Okay, so I think what you will find is that these people are not delusional. They don't actually believe something that isn't. They are willfully ignorant. They know what happened on October 7th, and they are pretending that it didn't. They know that Israel has the right to defend themselves, that everybody has the right to defend themselves. And that's another question that you could ask them. Do nations have the right to defend themselves? I hear this argument a lot that, well, they just need to forgive and forget. Okay, but forgiveness can only be done on a personal level, from person to person. It is not the job of a government to forgive at all. It's not the job of a government to forgive a wrong that was done to its people. It's the job of a government to protect its people. And so if it's forgiveness is great, and there needs to be forgiveness, but the forgiveness has to come person to person. If the people in Israel can forgive the people in Gaza, and the people in Gaza can forgive the people in Israel, then this will finally end. unfortunately, I haven't found very many people in Israel or in Gaza. Uh, I haven't found very many Palestinians or Israelis who are willing to forgive right now, and that's quite unfortunate. Okay. Uh, okay. So somebody says, why won't Israel release the footage? It's their own testimony. Israel has released a tremendous amount of footage of what happened on October 7th. They haven't released all of it because some of it is so gruesome that they're doing you a favor by not releasing it. What's out there is gruesome enough, but the stuff that they are choosing not to release right now, you can find it. It's out there. I'm not going to tell you where, but that stuff has been leaked. But Israel is they have released plenty of footage that is very damning to the argument that says Hamas did not actually kill any civilians on October 7th. Should they have made the complete video public for the world to see? I think maybe they should have, but they chose not to, again, for humanitarian reasons, because some of the stuff that was shown in that 43-minute video they showed the journalists was, you know, from in a sexual nature, uh, things like that. That you know, there are sick people out there that would actually, you know, take that stuff and enjoy watching it, and they don't want to, you know, be party to that. I just keep reading Zephaniah chapter 2. Let's see what other. Wow, thank you very much. Take Connie out to dinner. You know, it's Connie's birthday today, and so I am going to take Connie out to dinner. Thank you very much. Uh, Connie is enjoying her birthday by sitting upstairs and doing nothing. That's what she wanted to do today. Was she didn't want to leave the house, and so I'm taking care of everything else, feeding the monkeys and the dogs, and the only time she's gonna leave the house today is going out to dinner. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it, and we will use that for dinner tonight. So thank you. Okay, I've got to run because I've got a live hit coming up here in a few minutes, and yeah, they're going to be calling me here pretty quick. Let's see. Why does Israel not allow journalists into Gaza? Yeah, that is a very good question, Heartbeats. Um, you know, I've had this discussion with the people in charge of the public affairs office for the IDF, and they are, I think they're very afraid of being sandbagged. So the actions they're taking to try to keep from being sandbagged are guaranteeing that they're going to be sandbagged. By sandbagged, I mean they're going to, they're afraid that they're, like some journalist is going to come in there, is going to film what they're doing, and is going to take it completely out of context and turn it into something that it's not and make it worse. Or they're going to put out something that would actually help the enemy. There are ways to avoid that. If you widely disseminate what's going on, see, the model that the IDF has chosen for this conflict is to send their own cameramen, who are IDF combat cameramen, into Gaza, have them film lots of stuff. They then edit it, hide faces, things like that, and put it out for everybody to see. The problem with that is when the video is coming from one of the two combatants, it is immediately suspect, and rightly so. So they need to be much more forthcoming about allowing journalists in there, and it has hurt them tremendously because they are not. And they just are. I mean, look, whenever you make a decision based out of fear, it's going to come back to bite you. And I believe that's what the IDF is doing. They are afraid of letting the truth be told out of Gaza, not because the truth would itself would hurt them, but because of the way it would be portrayed. And that is a really stupid mistake. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's my opinion. All right, folks, I've got to run. Again, I've got a live hit coming up. So if you want to go watch Newsmax, I'll be on Newsmax at about I don't know, in about half an hour or so. So God bless you all. Thank you for watching, and thank you for the happy birthdays for Connie. That's really kind of you. I'm not sure if she's on right now, but Connie is. I don't know if she's on moderating or not. I told her I was going live, but I appreciate all of you very much. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you again likely tomorrow.